What's up, everyone? I hope that you are enjoying your summer as best you can given the circumstances. Before we jump into today's episode and the details for that, if you haven't already, please subscribe and like and share this particular episode as well as the others. Is to help get practical Christianity in front of the eyes and in the ears of all of those who are searching. But please follow us if you haven't already on Facebook and YouTube at Fourth Quarter Christianity. Be sure also to follow us on Instagram at fourth_quarter_Christianity. Twitter also at underscore 4Q and C. Again, we're thankful for all of you guys and your support. Today, I'm excited to announce to you our guest speaker. Her name is Vernè Wine. She is a sister loctician. She has been doing sister locks for quite some time, a number of years now. And today we're talking about the physical features of the athlete. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I haven't heard many discussions about hair. Hair is one of those topics that seem to go unnoticed or undiscussed. And that's not to say that they aren't being discussed. I just haven't been privy to them. So I wanted to take it upon myself to specifically set aside an episode to talk about hair. Now, we're specifically talking about hair in Black culture, but we're going to address hair overall as Christians and how we are to wear our hair and things like that. We're going to try to be as practical as we possibly can. And I hope, as always, that this episode will be a benefit to you and add value to your lives, as well as I hope the others have thus far. Again, guys, thank you so much for your support. Please continue to pray for this work and this effort. And now we'll get right into the show with Vernè.
It is a mentality that shuns excuses and focuses on what's at stake. A mindset that resolves within itself that you must totally empty yourself to experience victory. A memory that remembers that who and what you are playing for is bigger than you.
Vernè, it is good to have you on the podcast. I'm excited about our conversation. I think it's one that we definitely need to talk about, especially in the church. And so I am thankful that you have come on to share your practical knowledge with us. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It was fun getting to meet with you before the podcast and to make sure that we had everything squared away because I know that things are a little bit different once you get the camera rolling. So we want to try to chip away at some of that ice right away. We're going to start by letting you introduce yourself so everyone can know you better.
Okay. My name is Vernè. I am from Virginia. I'm 23 years old. I'm currently a full-time esthetician student. And I also do sister locks as my full-time job. I've been doing that for 3 years. Um, I have a family that is very loving, a brother who's a preacher, and my sister, she's in college, and then my dad, who's an elder here at the church, and my mom. And we're all like, we just love doing all things church events and stuff like that. I do some speaking for Ladies' Days, and I am one of the main, I guess you would say, not leaders, but coordinators for the teen girls here. So I do a lot with them and I'm very active. I actually am doing something with them today. So it keeps me busy. But yeah.
Yeah, how do you like that? I didn't know about the about you being the main coordinator for the teen girls. How's that going?
It's it's interesting. I used to be in the group, but we
Okay.
just recently transitioned with a new preacher and preacher's wife. So the preacher's wife before, she was in charge of the ladies, and I just helped out, and when she left I decided to take the reins. It's been a little bit difficult because I am a full-time student and I work full-time, but it's starting to get a little bit easier just balancing it out and stuff like that. But I love working with girls.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite things to do, just to watch them grow and just to help as much as I can in their daily life.
Well, no, that's absolutely cool. I know you guys just got Benjamin and Ty, right? And
Yes.
there, yeah. Benjamin's a good friend of mine. We are part of a marital enrichment group together, so get a chance to meet with him and a couple other guys every month. Him, Hiram, Melvin, and a few others. So yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I know they put up the picture and stuff on Facebook and told us that they were going down, and so yeah, super excited for them. Shout out to them for sure.
Yes.
How is the I know you mentioned that your dad is an elder. I would be remiss not to say this. Definitely got supported by you guys while at preaching school. So thankful for that. There were times where, boy, my support like was low some months, and then you guys have come through. So definitely appreciate that. Tell your dad and mom that I'm thankful to know you guys, and thankful that you guys supported me through preaching school. That was fantastic. Made my journey a lot easier, as easy as you could possibly make it at a preaching school. Anyway, so well, let's get right into it. I mean, what started your journey on dealing with hair and sister locks and stuff like that? If you don't mind telling us that.
Well, my mom, okay, so I guess it started when we moved to Virginia. My there was a friend of ours who we knew very well, and all of their daughters had sister locks.
Okay.
Well, all their daughters who were 12 and up. And then the mom was a loctician. And so when my sister, I mean, I was 10 and she was 11. So when my sister was around them, she was just kind of like, she's always kind of struggled with wanting hair, like, on the boxes you see. She's like, I want hair like that. And so she was like, Mom, I want sister locks. I want sister locks, because we would always wear like twists. When we were young, we wore beads, and then we wore like twists or like the big braids, and we didn't like them because they only lasted a couple days before they got frizzy. And then um and so the lady said that she would do my sister's hair when at no charge. And so she did my sister's hair, and then she did my mom's hair. And then she told my mom that and I was too young to get them at the time. So then they were about to move the next year. So she told my mom, why don't you take the class? Because you have to take a 4-day training class to do sister locks. And so my mom took the class, and then I was the first person she did. So I was 11 when she did my hair. And since I was 11, my mom has been taking sister lock clients. And we do it at our house. And so I guess I've just been seeing it all my life. And then when I finished school, I I started working at a daycare, and I didn't like it because the way I was raised and the way these kids were, I just couldn't handle it, because you can't discipline them, you can't tell them anything. And so I went to private nannying. I couldn't do that either. So then I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, because I didn't have any like work experience. My mom was like, why don't you take this spot class and just kind of do it as a buffer until you figure out what you want to do. So I took the class, and I've been doing it ever since. And then I got into doing esthetician stuff and skincare. And so I do both um, right now. And I think I may transition more over to skincare because it's hard to do both, but I will still maintain a few clients just because it's a part of my life. But so that's how I kind of got into it.
Well, man, that is fantastic. Goodness, like I even so, sister locks are dreads, right?
We're actually gonna talk about dreads. So they're
Okay.
just locks.
Okay.
They're very, very small. The method is a little bit different. You have to use a special tool, parting grid. To get them first installed and started can take um my very first client, when I was fresh, took me 47 hours to install an
Man.
entire head of locks over a period of a week. Now I kind of got it down to like 20 hours to install. And then you just kind of maintain them with a tool every 4 to 6 weeks. It takes about, depending on how the hair is, it takes about 2 to 4 hours every
Yeah.
four to
Okay.
six
Okay. Well, yeah, I definitely don't want to take away from the episode, because we're definitely going to talk about that, and I'm looking forward to it.
weeks.
Well, I just want to we can just jump right in. I know, of course, you know that this podcast sort of utilizes sports as a metaphor for life to help us better understand God's word and convey spiritual messages to those who are listening. So when you think about the athletic side of it, of course, athletes have these expressions about themselves from with their hairstyles. If you think about the last year's the year before last reigning champ, what is the guy's name? Patrick Mahomes, number 15, I believe, for the Kansas City Chiefs. He has a sort of I call it like a Mo frohawk, but it leans to the side, and I mean it's really nice. He has a nice hairstyle. Of course, Odell Beckham has a nice hairstyle, and I mean you just get into some of these athletes and look how they express themselves through their hair. There was a recent article that I read on a high school wrestler. The kid was a black kid, and he had dreads, and I think his dreads were the ones where he had it like shaved on the side, but his dreads kind of came over top of his forehead. And the referee at the time said that you aren't meeting the regulation for hair, and so she gave him a option really, and it would have been a dilemma for me, but she was like, either you can cut your dreads where they meet the hair standard, or you can just forfeit this match. The kid in the heat of the moment, cut his dreads, and he lost about 2 to 3 inches on his dreads, and then he could wrestle. So the article was called "Policing Black Men's or Black Males' Hair," and so of course we want to get into that a little bit. I told you before we even started how there were always this sort of I'm not going to call it discrimination, but a close monitoring of black hair, especially black men hair, even in the church, because it looks different, it grows different, and I'm sure it probably have the same to happen to black women in the church, and we just want to try to cover as much as we can. I know we can't get to everything, but at least cover as much as we can. So the first question is hair an expression in black culture, all cultures, or is it just an expression in general?
Um, so I wrote like yes and no. It all just depends on the person. There are a lot of cultures that hair is an expression. And I had looked up a few, like there's Indian tribes, special hairstyles like mohawks when they were going to war. There are some Jewish tribes that only allows people to grow their hair naturally, is like a religious thing. Buddhist monks shave their heads, so that's part of their, religion. Um, so it just all depends. Um, and just like socially and religiously, like when I used to help out at a camp in DC with the Otes,
Mm,
and there was a big group of I don't really know what they called themselves, but their hair was part of their culture, and it was like a huge thing. And because I had locks, they would ask me like, "Why do you have locks?" And I was like, "It's just for ease. Like it's not hard. It's like I don't have it as
yeah.
an expression of anything." And they were always like trying to talk to me about, well, it should mean something to you, And I was like, well, I feel like, everyone's culture is different. A lot of their families came over from Africa or Jamaica. And so, especially over there, there's a lot more religious things with your hair. And I was like, for me, it never has been anything about culture. So I think it all just depends on the person or the group. Because I know a lot of people with like my clients, not one of them do it for cultural reasons.
Right.
And then I know a lot of people in the church who have locks, there's so many different types of locks. And I don't know anyone in the church who do it for cultural reasons. It's mostly people who are in other religions, or especially people overseas.
Right.
I guess that. Um, but it can also be someone's identity, because hair can take a toll on someone, especially Black women. I've talked to a lot of women about their hair journey, and there have been people who have been crying like during my consultations because they have gone through so much. Um, so for them, it's like if they get locks, it kind of will be like take a toll off of them.
Right.
And so for them, it means more than maybe someone else. Like I have some people who just do it because they don't have time to do their hair. And some people who do it because they're getting persecuted in their workplace because people are always getting on them about their hair. And so they're like, I need something that won't look like I didn't do anything, even though sometimes they're sitting in the mirror for 2 hours and they did something. But when they go to work, it's like, what'd you do to your hair? Why does it look like that? And when my clients tell me that, I'm just like, someone said that to you? And it's kind of sad because especially black women are harder on black women. And so a lot of them will say something to them in the workplace, like, why didn't you do your hair today? They're like, I didn't do my hair today. And so it kind of just gets them kind of emotional about it. And so it is an expression to them to have hair, so that sometimes it's just so that people will leave them alone.
Right.
And that's the reason Sister Locks was started, was because it started in 93, and she made them really small, so it kind of looks like you just have loose hair. It doesn't really look like locks until you get kind of close up, because dreads weren't really accepted as much in workplaces in 93. So she did something that would be accepted in workplaces. And so now a lot of people are getting it because, like, the military now is accepting locks. They have to be certain size and different things like that. Um, so that's kind of just what I had for
Yeah,
that.
no, that's fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of steer into this a little bit. I know that you mentioned that some of your clients, some of them have different journeys on their way to when you have your consultation with them. How do you find yourself having to adapt to both sides? Like the one who's, I mean, they just really want their hair, done because they don't have time to do it themselves, versus the one who's been on I mean, a very sort of roller coaster ride journey. And now, if they get this is who they are. Like this is going to help them enhance their way of life and things like that. How do you find yourself adapting to either one?
I mean, it's not extremely hard. I noticed that the clients who are doing it because they want is they want it as to help with their identity, they take care of their hair better. So
Okay.
I'm noticing that when those clients come in, their retights are a lot easier, they're smoother. I don't have to talk to them about a lot of stuff. They take care of their hair compared to other people who do it because they don't do anything with their hair. They still don't do anything with their hair when they talk, and you still have to do a little bit. It doesn't take as long. And so I'm constantly telling, you have to do things, and then, a year down the line, I'm like, why does my locks look like this? It's because they're supposed to be uniform, and sometimes they're not uniform because they didn't take care of it. It's like, it's because you didn't do anything with it. Yes, you got it for, ease, but you still have to do a little bit. I'm not doing all the work. You still have to do, you only see me once every month and a half.
Right.
And so your hair, you have your hair up, the entire time in between. So
Mm.
it's mostly just kind of, I just struggle more, I guess, with people who do it just because they don't want to do their hair than I do with, the other people. And the other people, there's a huge difference. Like, if I look at the back of someone's head, she's like, I can tell they took care of their hair. And a lot of them, because they have to, Sister Locks is not really cheap to start with. So
Yeah.
they save their money. And some of them, it's also can depend on how they are financially. Some of them um, have been saving for years to get it, and they will take care of their hair a whole lot more than someone who has money just sitting around. And it'll be like, I'm like, you spent all this money to get it done, and then you're just neglecting it. And so there's all kinds of
Yeah.
things, but usually people who have struggled in the past, they'll tell me stories about, getting terrible burns on their head, or
Mm.
bad relaxers and perms, coloring things. And it's just like, and they're like, so I'm struggling to fight to get my hair back. And so they will take care of it a whole lot more because they've had that struggle. And then I have people come here with all this hair, never had a problem. They just are tired of taking care of it. And then it's like, I look at their hair a year later and I'm like, what did you do? Because that's not my work.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, y'all are my business cards. So, and it's very interesting from day to day.
Yeah.
But I also get a lot of transfer clients, like clients that I didn't install, and that I have to help. And it kind of makes me a little bit upset when
Mhm.
someone else claims they do sister locks, because there's a lot of frauds out there. And when they come to me, I look at their hair, I'm like, I don't know what they did, because that's not, you paid all this money, you're paying the same amount but they're getting a knockoff version. And so I have to, fight to get their hair back too. So it's a whole process. It can take
Man.
a toll on you for sure if you're not prepared. Like I have to be mentally prepared for each client that walks in the door, because sometimes I'm just like, I don't know what they're gonna ask me about today, or
Yep.
mention someone said, because I get a little upset when I hear what people say to them at work. And like one girl, her hair is naturally just, everyone's hair texture is different, but hers
Yeah.
is just, it's not wild. It's just, it doesn't want to do like, it doesn't want to listen.
Yeah.
Like, you can train your hair to do something, and hers is like, not me. And so but she gets so much talk from people at work, from black women, black men, and white men too.
Hmm.
And sometimes she's like, I go to my car and cry, because I'm just like, I'm trying to look professional. But this is the easiest way for me. I have a little girl, and I'm just like, I can't believe people say that to her. Like the stuff that
Yeah.
they say, like, why does your hair look like that? And "Well, I thought you just got it done. Why is it frizzy? And I'm like, you don't say that to somebody.
Mm.
Like that's not the kind of things. If anything, there's ways you can be helpful. Like if you know some way of helping, help. But if you can't help, don't say anything.
Yeah. Just
Like,
just don't say anything. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I totally respect that. I think that actually speaks volumes of you. I mean, having to adapt to each client and their specific needs. So at one, I kind of look at it this way: like for one client, you're a hairstylist, the ones that they can't do anything with their hair, so they want you specifically for that. But then for this other client, you're a hairstylist plus a friend plus I don't know, a mental health counselor. Like that's what it seems like. And so I mean, I think your adaptability is exceptional. Like I think most people can't adapt that well, and so I think it's really intriguing to hear how well that you adapt to it. And when you think about hair in certain cultures, like I know for me, like I thought of this, like when you look at other hair, like do those specific hairstyles like have or express like I don't know, specific messages. So I know for instance, like I have a best friend who was originally from Botswana, Africa, like that at least that part of Africa. And this braid that comes out the middle of the hair towards the back, just
Hmm.
this, I mean, that was the longest piece of hair. At the end it had a bead, and I'm like, "Well, what is that?" It looks like a tail. And he told me like it symbolizes strength. And so the first person I thought about was Samson in the Bible, right? Like, okay, he had long hair. Many believe that to be dreads, and he had that specifically, and it specifically was for his strength, but he did it for a vow, right? And so if you cut his hair, then he loses strength, but if you don't, he retain his strength. And so I just want to get into that a little bit. Like, does hairstyles, like like your mohawks, your dreads, and all of that, like, do they express specific messages?
Um, I honestly, I didn't even think about the braid, because I've seen the braid a lot. I
Hmm.
was thinking mostly about dreadlocks, because that's kind of what for me, like my entire business is just around locks.
Right.
So that's mostly what I know. Um, and I think I'll get into a little bit more later, like kind of what dreadlocks means. And it's very interesting to me. But some cultures, like Indian cultures, mohawks can mean something, especially like preparing for battle and stuff like that. I haven't really heard much about braids, to
Okay.
be honest. I took it as like adding braids, not so much just like the natural braid. Um, and I think in like America, in here, a lot of times hairstyles that we see, 9 times out of 10, it's for ease. It's not so much for a meaning. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't people out there
Yeah. Yeah.
whose
Sure. Yeah.
hair, means something to them and it's supposed to give off a message. But 9 times out of 10, like if I ask someone, "Oh, what made you want to get a mo?" It's just because like I like the style. I thought it looked cool on their head, so I put it on my head. Um, so that's kind of what, and like I mentioned before, the community in DC, a lot of them, it's a message. It means something to them. Um, and so that's kind of where I went with that. Um, I don't run into people who say their hair is a message.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying that there aren't people who who do take that approach. I just haven't come across it.
Yeah, yeah, and no problem. Yeah, same thing with me. Like even before, asking the question, you do research on it. And I talk to people personally who have, hairstyles that maybe I'm not accustomed to seeing, and I'm like, oh, what made you get that hairstyle, or who did that for you? What does that mean to you? And most people just say, oh, I thought it looked cool, or
Yeah.
I just thought, to try something new. Everyone else has this, so I wanted to try this, and I'm like, okay, maybe that is the culture in America,
Mhm.
versus other cultures who do sort of deliberate a little longer on what type of hairstyles to get because they actually do mean something. I know, like in Spartan War and stuff like that, the men would shave their heads and to go out for battle. And I mean, when the Spartans shaved their head, you know that it was time for war. Like
Mhm.
it was definitely time to go out and have, in their culture at least, some bloodshed, and the men come back victorious and things of that nature. So, um, I guess how do we as Christians look at this? Like these sort of like how we wear our hair. How do we handle that? Like wearing specific hairstyles and still expressing this idea of holiness. And the reason I ask this is because there's like the Bible speaks a lot about putting on something. And most of the times when people think about that or read that, it's like, okay, I'm putting on something physically, so like my clothes or something like that. Like what does the Bible mean? And it's like, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that. Like we're told to put on Christ, right? Ephesians 3, excuse me. Then go over to Romans 6, 1 through 4. And Paul speaks about putting on Christ. And of course, that means in baptism. But the idea is, am I literally putting on Christ? Well, no, I mean, no, I'm not. But spiritually speaking, I am. The same thing is conveyed when putting on these type of virtues like temperance, knowledge, and grace, and things of that nature. And of course, patience is a virtue. Clothing yourself in righteousness. These are not physical attributes, of their spiritual attributes, and the Bible speaks a lot about that. So I would think that the way we present ourselves physically will convey a message to the world as to, am I really dressed in righteousness, holiness, temperance, and all of that. So, I mean, could you just speak to that a little bit? How are Christians to sort of wear their hair, or at least what perspective should they have in order for them to convey a message of holiness?
Yeah, definitely. I personally, it is my belief that we should never assume with hairstyles why someone's wearing their hair like that. That's my very first in all aspects of life, and I learned this with working in childcare. Never assume what's going on in someone's life or why they do certain things, because I think assuming things can lead people to just going down a rabbit hole of just like judgment.
Mm-hmm.
um and there is a couple spots in the Bible, and I speak when I say most of the stuff is mostly as a woman,
Mm-hmm.
but talk about not like braiding your hair and gold, and I'm gonna talk about a little bit of that a little bit later.
Yeah.
um but as regards to this, I just came from the aspect of not assuming that someone is doing something one as a message. And I personally, one time I asked one of my friends, because she's very Afrocentric. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was just wondering, as a Christian, to my another Christian sister, kind of to see where she was at. Because I personally believe that if she was thinking of it as a certain thing, that we should have a study about it. Because as a Christian, um, we have in the Bible what we believe, what we teach other people, and I just wanted to make sure we were on the right page, because there's going to be times where we may convert somebody who comes from the world, who believes that their
Mm-hmm.
hair has a message and a meaning, and I think we should be prepared to talk about that with them, just to talk about what we're supposed to be conveying as a Christian. And it's not that our hair means something spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Now, personally, if it's the message to them, like my hair means freedom to me, I understand that. There's nothing wrong with that to me, because yes, especially with Black women, like sister locks is freedom for a lot of women, and that's what they'll say to me when they're done. I'm like, I feel free. And so they'll tell the people, why'd you get it? So I could be free, but not in a spiritual sense,
Right.
more in a social sense. Um, and so I believe that you can have any kind of hairstyle really, and still be holy and still do what God commands. I just personally believe if you do it and you're trying to push some kind of religious message on other people about your hair and their hair, then I think that's where we draw the line.
Right.
um, because as Christians, the only thing we're supposed to be teaching others about Christ,
Right.
and trying to, help them go to heaven, and to uplift each other, encourage each other as we go through this our walk in life, and not about your hair means this.
Right.
Um, and I think I don't run into a lot of people who assume and out loud.
Yeah.
Um, so personally, I don't talk about my hair or hair to like different groups, because I don't want them to. Yes, I'm crazy about my hair. I love my hair, but I don't want them to think that, oh, she has some kind of message. So I'm very careful about how I just go about it. And I think all Christians who have different hairstyles should be careful not to make it seem like you're doing it as a religious message.
Right.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, no, it definitely makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
um and because I know most of the people, and not just with natural hair, but like with weaves, braids, wigs, we do it because it's easy.
Yeah.
Like I had when I was in school my first year, there was a few girls who would be late because they were doing their hair in the morning. It took them 2 hours just to get their hair to brush out and be even. And so she put braids in her hair because that's what was easy for her to go through her daily life. And so for anything like for us to just assume, oh, that she's doing that because she's trying to, that's just where we have to draw the line.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, that's definitely helpful. I know, like, I don't know. I sort of thought about the Nazarite vow now. Like, if someone was to, you know, take on the Nazarite vow, I don't personally think it would be wrong. And I don't even think scripturally it would be wrong. It's just if you try to push that onto other people, like you can't, of course, you can't do that. Now, if for you, your hair is a symbol of your, I don't know, expression towards God, or your, I don't know, your spiritual allegiance towards God, and you don't want to cut it because of that, then that's fine. It's the same thing how I view fasting, right? Like fasting isn't required, but if you want to fast, and if fasting for you means that you're growing closer to God, we see examples of that in scripture, definitely. And so I don't think practicing that for yourself is a wrong thing. But of course, when you try to push that off on other people within the same religion, okay, that's a scruple. It's like, no, you can't do that. So definitely, I haven't run into many people myself that use their hair as a sort of spiritual message, but I do know that other cultures like India, the women shave their hair as a sort of offering to one of their gods. I can't remember the specific one, but to one of their gods. And I know that a lot of the hair that like the weaves and stuff, come from India and other places. So uh, the next question that comes to mind is like, what are like common misconceptions about hairstyles and texture in Black culture, and why are some other cultures so enamored with Black people's hair?
Okay, so I picked out three. There's a lot of misconceptions, but I picked out three ones that kind of came to my head first. The first one is that a lot of people think our hair isn't versatile, and that's why we throw on a wig or anything like that. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. And I believe, and just this is speaking from one ethnicity to another, because I
Yeah.
believe that a lot of Black people understand that we can do a bunch of stuff, but we can see that because a lot of times we'll research it, just kind of like the stuff we watch, the kind of stuff we see. Like I have an Instagram feed, it's just hair,
Yeah.
just black women hair, all kinds of different hairstyles, and there's a ton of them. And a lot of people just think we can't do anything with our hair. Um, we can't curl it, we can't make it look fancy, we can't make it look formal. And that's completely that's so wrong. This is like the furthest thing from the truth. The second thing is that our hair cannot grow. Um, I have, and this is from both sides, believe
Yep.
that, because it's what we see and it's what happens to a lot of, and again, I'm coming from a women's side. Um, a lot of times when we see natural hair, it's very short. It's either short, crop short, or like short froze. Um, and I, I'm not bragging, but that it's a lie that our hair can't grow long. My hair is down my back. And one of the reasons that it is because I don't comb it, I don't put heat on it, I don't do a lot of things that would cause our natural hair to just shed. And so it can grow a little bit longer. So when we put heat on it, when we put chemicals in it, color, color can stop hair growth. And a lot of people color their hair. Um, and it can just slow down hair growth. And then we're constantly having to comb it and brush it, and our hair sheds. Um, so hair on average grows a half an inch per month, everyone's hair. Um, but just depending on what our hair is dealing with, heat, dryness, chemical abuse, it could just make it seem like our hair doesn't grow. So our hair, we can't have long hair. So that's a super common misconception. And also shrinkage. Our hair shrinks. Like sometimes you'll go look at someone and you're like, okay, their hair is short, and then they'll pull it, and it's like all the way is like, no, it's just our hair is very, very curly. And so it shrinks. And if some and then sometimes I've seen one girl, she did this, and I felt so bad for her because um someone came up to her and said, "Oh, you changed your hair." She was trying to be nice, and she was like, "Oh, you got a new hairstyle." And she's like, "No, I didn't." She just straightened her hair, and it was down her back, and
Hmm.
they just thought she got like a weave or something. And I was like, "No, there's." Anyway, I'm gonna talk about it a little in a second. And then another common misconception is that our hair isn't good hair. A
Mm.
lot of people think that we have just bad hair, and that's why we do everything that we do to it, which is the furthest thing from the truth. And like I said earlier, a lot of the styles that we do is because our hair takes a lot to maintain sometimes of time because it's great hair.
Right.
Like, and I personally, I have clients that'll come into me and they're like, oh, my hair is terrible. And I'm touching their hair, I'm like, your hair is great. I don't know who told you your hair is bad, but this is perfect hair. Like, oh, my hair. And they'll think it's bad because their hair is too kinky
Hmm.
or too, coily tangles. That means your hair is extremely healthy. That doesn't mean that's not bad at all. And and I have to tell them that, like, your hair is great. Like your hair is like, and I love working with hair like that because that's the best hair for me to do what I need to do.
Hmm.
That's a common misconception that we don't have good hair. And a lot of that comes from the world's view of our hair is
Yeah.
telling people that. And so then it makes you believe I don't have good hair because it doesn't look like this. When we see commercials and ads and all kinds of stuff, they throw a wig on us, or they'll throw, and sometimes they look really bad.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel so bad for the person in that commercial. Because it's like they didn't care. It's like they told her, while she was running on set, throw a wig on. Um, and so we have these things, misconceptions in our head. And to be completely honest, I don't know why people are so enamored with our hair.
Mm.
Um, to me, it's just, I'm not fascinated by their hair, so I don't know why they're fascinated with mine. But and I think maybe it's just for years and years, um, Black people have been finding ways to do their hairs to not stand out. And so weaves and wigs kind of make it look like everyone else's hair.
Yeah.
And so then when our natural hair comes out, everyone's like, oh, wow. It's just because their hair doesn't look like that.
Yeah.
Um, and I've noticed over the last 4 years, a lot more people have decided to go natural and wear their hair out. Um, and I did want to add a couple of things of things to never ask a Black person about their hair.
Sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
I just wanted to say this because I felt like I had to. Um, and it's not, and I know a lot of people say this kind of, and they're trying to be nice and just have conversation, but we don't like these questions. And I'm just gonna just gonna
Go.
read them
Yeah.
out.
Go for it. Go for it.
Is your hair real?
Oh
That is
boy.
the number one for me. I get this probably every time I go out. I get someone asks me that. black or white.
Hmm.
If a black person asks me that, I'm not as, because they're sometimes it's because they're like, I want what you have, which is fine. But I get a lot of other races asking me this question. And for me, it's kind of like, I don't ask you if your hair is real. And
Right.
because I watch a lot of hair stuff, I know there are a lot of other races that put in extensions in their hair and their hair is not real. There's a
Yeah.
girl at my school, I just found out she wears extensions and I did not know that. So it's like everyone can have extensions. So, but I don't go and ask you, is your hair real? That's, and how, I don't, it just rubs me the wrong way. Another one is, can I touch your hair? No, you
Oh
cannot
boy.
touch my hair. I have gotten people, and they think I can't feel it because it's, somewhere in the, I can feel when they touch my hair.
Yeah.
Strangers in stores when I'm in line will touch my hair without even asking. And that to me is just, don't touch someone's hair. I wouldn't go up to someone and just be like, oh, I want to touch your hair because it's so long. It looks different. Don't touch my hair. And I don't even like when people ask me to touch it. And I'm trying to be nice, so I'll be like, yeah, you can touch it, but I don't want you to.
Right.
Because it's my hair. Like, I can't get it through my head why someone would want to touch someone else's hair. You don't know. I washed my hair recently. You don't know anything. I don't know where your hands have been. So it's just, it rubs us the wrong way. And it may not seem that way to anyone else who doesn't
Mm.
get those questions, but it's that way to me. And then another one is, I've heard this question a lot. Why don't you wear your natural hair out? I hear that a lot. Like, people like, why? Oh, well, your hair was so pretty. Why don't you wear it that way? Because it takes time, and a lot of times that's why we don't cover it up because we're ashamed of
Hmm.
our hair. We cover it up because we want to get to work on time sometimes, or we have things to do, and it's easier, and that's why we do it. And people may think it's the most innocent question, but sometimes that one to me is like the worst. Just kind of like, I've had someone ask me, why do I wear my hair in locks and why don't I wear it out? First of all, I've had these for 12 years, and if I were to take them out, this I don't know what would happen. It's not like some people can pick out traditional locks,
Hmm.
the bigger locks, and they can still have. If I were to try to pick out my hair, I'd probably lose most of it because it's for 12 years it's been growing in a lock and it doesn't know how to grow outside of a lock or how
Hmm.
to survive. Um, so that question definitely can just make someone. I've had clients tell me they went home and cried because they were like, you know, just these questions can just be harsh, and you may not
Hmm.
think it is, but I just wanted to throw that in there because
No, that's
I
thank
feel
you.
like a lot
That
of people
that helps.
need to hear that one.
No, that definitely helps. Like I said, it's we're trying to clear up as much of, or excuse me, as many of the misconceptions that we can, because I know there is a lot out there. I have, when Key first dreaded her hair, and she went with the sort of medium sized dreads a little bit, and it was primarily because of for ease.
Mhm.
She didn't want to keep going back and getting heat put on her hair. She definitely didn't want a perm, and she made me think about something actually. A conversation we had recently. She said, if we were maybe in another culture, so maybe somewhere in Africa, right? I'm just going to use that as an example. Do you think like people who live to who sort of brought in this European culture of hair, would they feel sort of, I don't know, ostracized, or sort of like the ones that's being like their hair has been monitored if they were in another culture? Do you think that has something to do with the things that you just mentioned, because we are in a society that sort of utilized European standards in regards to hair? What do you
They
think about
really,
that?
they really do. I personally believe that maybe it wouldn't be so bad, but then again, I don't know. I There's a lot of things that I would think, oh, this would be different if it was on the other hand, but then sometimes situations happen. I'm like, it really wouldn't be.
Yeah.
I really don't think it would be, and I think it's just, and I don't know. I've never been to Africa. I've been to Jamaica,
Yep.
and in Jamaica, most of the people I've run into whose hair was natural was dreaded or locked. And a lot of it was freeform locks, which is just because they don't do their hair. Um, and that was normal. Like that was
Yeah.
very, so when they saw my hair, they've never seen really anything like that. Because I went there on a mission trip, and so I got a lot of questions from them because they were just, they've never seen locks so small. They
Mhm.
thought I had a lot of them thought I had fake hair because they've never seen small locks that were long, that weren't really big, and so for them, even my hair wasn't normal, um, but it, like, if you're just going around Jamaica, it's normal. And
Right.
so, they do, I do notice they do like to touch
Yeah.
other races hair and stuff like that, um because they don't really see that around them, and a lot of them have never, except for mission trips, have never met people with different hair.
Yeah.
So, um to I guess it, just from seeing from that standpoint, maybe, but then I'm not 100% sure because I feel like no matter what would happen, it would get flipped.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. It's weird. I know for, and I'm not by any means saying that the people I'm about to mention are the standard for black hair and then black culture and stuff like that. But if you go back and you look at like Cam Newton or Jay Z, Erica Badu, what the Weekend, J Cole, all of them, like, but specifically Jay Z, like, man, when I first saw his hair, like, what are you doing? Like, you have millions of dollars and your hair looks like two fans. Like, I don't know, but it's then I started doing more research because then I noticed Cam Newton's hair. Right. And I'm like, man, what are you doing? I mean, you're wearing suits, but I can't get over the hair. Like his hair is like
Mhm.
sticking up and like waving and want to hug you or something like that.
Yeah.
And so I I started doing research and found out that these men and women are doing this because they feel that for so long our ancestors were being I don't know, Europeanized or Americanized, and now they are trying to show, I guess, the rest of black culture that it's okay to wear your authentic hair, like to be your authentic self. And part of that is letting your hair grow the way it normally grows.
Mhm.
um so I don't their message to the fullest extent, I'm not going to say I wholeheartedly agree with, but I do think there's some truth, and I think there's something that's worth looking at as far as like our natural hair. And again, by no means are they the standard, but just trying to understand at least a little bit where they're coming from. And that sort of leads into the next question, like what are the origin of dreads? Like, how did dreadlocks originate?
Okay, right before I answer that, I
Go
just
ahead.
want to comment on what you said before. I honestly and truly believe that we should show, um, that what our natural hair looks like. I love seeing natural hair. I really do. And it's so pretty. Like I have what a lot of girls want, but
Hmm.
I will look at other girls with loose hair and I'll be like, oh, that's so pretty. I want, like, because I love that they're showing that, and it makes me want it. And so I love when women show their natural hair. It's beautiful.
Hmm.
But I and like I said before, never assume, but I do believe because of the culture that we live in America, we have to be careful when we are showing our natural hair, because a lot of times people who are in the spotlight do put a standard on us,
Yeah.
even if it's unintentional. And so they'll look at it and be like, ugh, why are they doing that? And then they're like, your hair. And sometimes that's where it can go. And that's how a lot of it starts, because they see people in that. And I understand they're trying to do it for the right reasons.
Right.
And they're not going to get the and if they do, they probably don't care. They're not going to get all the flack about it, but we will.
Right.
So I always say we have to be very careful, because there's a way to go about doing that. You can show and still look a certain way. And kudos to them for feeling comfortable doing that. But I do
Exactly.
think personally, we have to be careful with doing that, because, everything, I know we're not trying to, but sometimes we set the standard for something else. And
Hmm.
so, and then they'll always look at that person who set the standard. And then it's like, we can't change it later on.
Right.
Um, and so I just want, excuse me, I just want to say that
No, thank you.
before
Yeah,
we go
yeah.
into the next one. Um, Because I personally, like, when I first saw The Weeknd, I was like, what is he doing?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that you are trying to relay a message, but you don't hear, I mean, he probably doesn't hear what I hear, because he has, what people would say, dreads. And then they look at me like, oh, you have dreads too. I don't have dreads. But, it's kind of like, it's, it all looks the same to them. I don't know how, but it does. um, but going into dreads, and I've heard, I've never really looked into it until for this,
Mhm.
but it was very interesting. Reading the history of locks. Let's start with just locks before I go into dreads. Because like you said, Samson, I was reading a few things. I want to do a little bit more research when they were talking about they mentioned Moses and John the Baptist. I have to do a little bit more research on that personally before I just tell everyone, oh yeah, I think they had locks. I'm not gonna do that. But there have been some findings that maybe they had locks. And I'm going to do more research for myself. I didn't really have time to do that. But I did, Samson, his clearly says 7 locks, which gives the impression that he did have some form of lock.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to read this because I thought it was really interesting instead of trying to go off the top of my head.
No, go for it. Yeah.
When looking closer at the history of dreadlocks, it's actually quite obvious that even though the Rastafaris are most known for this hairstyle, dreads have actually been around much longer. They weren't called dreads then, so I'm just going to call them locks. In European times, there was a king, King Christian the Fourth, who ruled Denmark and Norway, developed something called the Polish plait, which is accidentally felting of the hair, which is what the definition of a lock would be. Is felting of the hair, where it just mats together. And so this caused people around him to wear it too, because the king wore it. The Aztecs, they had locks as an important symbol for high standing in society. And then we go down in Egypt. They have seen a lot of locks in there on mummies, and there was a pharaoh who they said wore dreadlocks at this time, and they found it both on his mummy and illustrations that they had made of him. But dreadlocks are a universal phenomenon in the East as well in the West. Spiritualists of all faiths and background incorporate it into their paths as a disregard for physical appearance and vanity. And so throughout the world, such seekers often cease to comb, cut, or otherwise dress their hair. And this is how dreadlocks kind of started. It is symbolic for spiritual understanding that vanity and physical appearances are unimportant. The counterpart to dreadlocks is the shaven head, which has the same aim, which is a disregard for vanity associated with physical appearances. Let's see. So I'm going to drop down because it's a lot. So it kind of just talks about, so that's how it started, because they were trying to show that, physical appearances doesn't matter. It's all vanity. So they let their hair go, basically. So they either shave their head or they would just let it do whatever. And so that's when dread started. And the name came from, they call themselves Dread, and then they had locks. I wrote it somewhere down here. It's in here somewhere. I should have spaced it out more so I could find it. The followers of this movement call themselves Dreads, signifying that they had a dread, fear, respect for God by doing this. So that's how the word dread started. And then because they had locks and they put it together, and then they had dreadlocks. And then later on, that group was known as the Rastafaris. And so that's kind of where dread is. It's part of a religious symbolization. And so that's why I am always very careful about when I say dreadlocks, because most people do not have dreadlocks. It's traditional locks, or some other we call, for the big ones that look like dreadlocks, I say traditional locks. Real dreadlocks, and I'll see people walking around, are the ones that don't have any shape or form. They just let it
Mm.
go. So that's dreadlocks. And that's a lot of times is associated with this religion of um, putting away physical appearances so that you can truly and be closer to God, more spiritual. There's a lot of different interpretations. Some people say it shows reverence. Some people say it brings you closer to God. Um, I did have written down somewhere that it. Oh, let me see if I can find it. Oh, the if the hair is knotted, they believe the energy remains within the hair, keeping the person strong and healthy. And they take that from Samson,
Mm-hmm.
because he didn't cut his hair. So there, when I was reading, there's a whole lot of different uh, ways people said it, but it is something that is religious dreads, because it's part of a organization, religious organization. Um, so I always say, when we're talking about uh, dreads or locks, to be very careful not to say dreadlocks for someone who doesn't have it, because that does mean religious something. So I usually say traditional locks. There's something called micro locks, there's sister locks, there's
Mm.
twist locks, there's all kinds of locks. Um, but when we do add the word dreads, because I when I first I have a friend, she has traditional locks, and I was like, oh, how long have you had your dreadlocks? This is before I knew about everything. She was like, don't ever say that. She's like, they're not dreads. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Like for her, she was like, she was letting me know that, and then she explained to me, dread is a religion
Man.
and I'm not part of that religion. So please call them traditional locks. And I was like, oh, wow, I did not know that. And so, sometimes you don't know. So it's
Right.
good to know. um, and then I was like, and that's when I started to understand. I never really did like a lot of research on it because I didn't have it, but it's traditional locks. If it's not a religion, then it would be dreadlocks.
Man, that helps. Goodness, like I was under the same impression, like just call it all dreadlocks until, of course, I learned about sister locks and stuff like that, and I didn't know if it was like, oh, this is the male version or female version. I didn't know the difference between the two, and but that definitely helps. I know I looked into a little bit of Persian history and a little bit into Nebuchadnezzar and like the Chaldean history as well,
Hmm.
and a lot of those men had this sort of coily textured hair, really sort of it wasn't matted together or anything like that, but it almost like they had cornrows,
Hmm.
just really sort of, I don't know, just they have it twisted down and it was down their backs. I mean, like they just look like really heavy, thick, coarse textured hair. And even in their beards, like they would have their beards sort of tied up together,
Hmm.
not like two people, but like just the hairs in their beard tied into one. And so even looking at that, I said, man, like they had some, I don't know, like maybe there was some type of style that we might have gotten from them, and of course, passed down and maybe changed or evolved over time. But they wore their hair long, and so it kind, I don't know, it kind of goes into the next question. Like, so you obviously read First Corinthians 11, and there seems to be a lot of restrictions on hair, the way that women can wear their hair, and not just women but men as well.
Hmm.
So like, first of all, like, does the Bible forbid women from shaving their heads for style purposes? And just to add context to that, it's like, so you obviously, yeah, you do look at First Corinthians, and there it says like, the hair of women is the glory of women, right? Versus like a man is, it's almost like the direct opposite, like, no hair for you. But then I can't help but think, if you look at the culture in that time, John the Baptizer would have had longer hair.
Hmm.
Uh, Jesus, I mean, they European Jesus, he has long hair, But even if you don't look at European Jesus and try to get somewhat of a biblical idea of what Jesus would have looked like, especially being from Palestine, the men grew out their hair. Like, in fact, it was sort of deemed as manliness to grow out this mane, like a lion, like literally, like they grow out their mane, and then you look at them like, oh, this is the male lion, this is the king of the jungle type thing. It was the same idea even then, even in Roman culture, when Rome was over everything. they grew out, the men grew out their manes, and it was essentially to separate the boys from the men. And so I thought that was interesting. And so as we sort of get into that, like, what do you think about that? Does the Bible forbid women from shaving their heads for style purposes?
Okay, I hate doing this to you, but
Yeah.
right before I answer that, I did
Oh,
want
go
to
ahead.
comment on something you said about under the dreadlock section. Um, I do want to say just to keep in mind that when we think about back in the Bible times, especially, a lot of stuff wasn't invented until like Egyptian time.
Hmm.
And so when you would think about things like combs and stuff like that, probably wasn't around at certain times. And so there was probably a lot more people than we think that had locks
Hmm.
because their hair naturally would mat together. And then as we go on, more things were invented. And so I just wanted to say that
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
when we think about it. But I think sometimes when we think about it too much, we can go like way off into this thing of falseness, I
Hmm.
guess, saying certain things. So I would never say like, oh yeah, this person in the Bible had locks, this person, the only person that we see clearly that probably had it, I'm gonna say I'm 90% positive he had it, was Samson, because the
Yeah.
Bible specifically said 7 locks. And unless he didn't have a lot of hair and
Yeah,
just
I was just about to say
which if he didn't cut it, he did. That's the only person I would assume had locks in the Bible. So I just did want to say that.
No, thank you.
Um,
Yeah.
but does the Bible forbid women from shaving their heads for style purposes? Um, this one was a little bit complicated for me to answer because personally for me, I would say no. And when I was reading, I read through a lot of Old Testament passages that talk about shaving heads. Most of it was talking about men, but in the Old Testament, a lot it just symbolized grieving, mourning. Um, Sometimes they did it because they did something bad, and God was saying, you should be ashamed of yourself," so they would shave their heads. There's also a couple spots in the Old Testament that talk about. Um, I had written all these down, and then I took them out because it was like getting into like pages and pages.
Mhm.
uh, but I was reading scriptures that talk about shaving heads, and there were a few. It wasn't in Jeremiah. It was in I think it was Deuteronomy. I think
Yeah.
that talked about not shaving your head because it may make you look like somebody, like the
Hmm.
pagan nations. So in the Old Testament, there were a little bit. It was a little bit different, and when we get into the New Testament, where the Bible talks about shaving heads for women, in First Corinthians 11, when they were talking about hair coverings, and then he mentions, it'd be better for them to shave their heads. And when I was reading, and I was reading a lot of commentaries and just like looking at the culture, that was referring to kind of like I don't know what you call it, but when you do something and they say you might as well just do that if you're going to do this kind of
Right. Yeah.
thing. So that's where shaving, when they talk about shaving their heads, because when they would go to the temple with their heads uncovered, um, he said, might as well just shave your head because you're dishonoring your husband. And he used the word head. I didn't really look into it, but there was a few people who said head could either mean your actual physical head or the head, your
Your
husband.
husband. Yeah.
Um, so I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure if I had more time to like do more research, I could kind of pinpoint on which one I believe it is. But it could be one or the other. Both make sense in this context. But the reason he said that is because in the temple, the priestesses with Aphrodite, the temple of Aphrodite, um, the priestesses inside um, would come down later, and they were basically prostitutes, and they did not
Hmm.
wear their head covered. So what he was saying is wear your head covered so you don't look like them.
Right.
Or if you do, it's better to shave your head because that brings you shame. Um, so you should be ashamed of not covering your head when you're at the temple. So that's what kind of like in the conclusion of what I got from that. But the reason I said no is because that was a cultural thing. And I think that's very important because I have heard people say women should not shave their heads, but it kind of makes me think, because it may, I know some people say because it makes you look manly. And I know, I have another verse written in, uh, where is it? Deuteronomy 22, 5, that talks about men are not to wear women's garments and women are not to wear men's garments. And so from that verse, you could take off, we're not supposed to look like men.
Right.
And, women are not supposed to look like men and men are not supposed to look like women. And so shaving your head can make you look like a man. But um, we have to be careful when we say things like that because there are a lot of reasons someone's head may be shaved. Um, Illnesses. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of, cancer, autoimmune diseases that can cause you to lose your hair. And so instead of just having patchy hair, they shave their head completely. And some people, alopecia,
Mm-hmm.
um, and there's another one. A lot of people who are albino, a lot of them shave their heads. Um, Hormone imbalances can do that. Medicine can cause you to lose your head. Burns, not your head, your hair.
Yeah.
Burns. If your head gets burned, you can't really grow hair in a spot that burned again. So we have to be careful when we say no, you shouldn't shave your head. But I've seen a lot of women who have shaved heads who still look very feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, is okay because they're not trying to look like a man.
Right.
It just, either it just happens. Some people do it for ease, like I said before. So a lot of hairstyles that are for to make it easier on people, and shaving your head is probably the easiest hairstyle you can have.
Mm-hmm.
um
True.
but from my readings, for us today, I do not believe that the Bible forbids us from shaving our heads. In that scriptural context, where a lot of people take that from, it was cultural, and there was a reason that he said that because they were not supposed to look like, the women at the temple who were prostitutes, and they were not supposed to, And so he was basically just saying, if you're gonna go with your hair uncovered, you know, you might as well just shave your head because it
Right.
would be the same type of dishonor. And I know it does. The Bible does talk about, glory and long hair and stuff like that. Um, but there was a lot of in that Roman culture, long hair was meant was like a big thing. The longer your hair was, the better, and that was cultural. And so I think a lot of times when we read scriptures, we have to realize what the culture that they're in and they're talking to. But so personally, from all my studies, I do not believe that we are forbidden from shaving our heads. I do,
Yeah.
however, believe that we are not supposed to look like men.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and there are many ways. I know a lot of females who have shaved heads who do not look like men, and a lot that do because they want to. So I think we just have to take that into account.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think we have the same mind in that regard. You can have it. I've seen men who have long hair that don't look like women,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa. I mean, even when you go back to this idea of having a shaved head, that was you already touched on it, so I'm not going to touch on it, any further than you did or try to undo what you have already done. But in the Old Testament, shaving your head was to show that you were grieving. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm thinking like to myself, like when did shaving hair become, this a norm, to do for men and primarily in our culture, men have shorter hair.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I believe totally that that's a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, sort of law governing our hair that says, oh, you don't, you must have short hair because you're a man. Like I look back throughout history and I see men, I mean, long hair on their head and on their face, like both, like they have double the long hair. And so, yeah, I think as long as you're not trying to blur that line, because obviously he makes distinctions in the Old and New Testament. And
Mm-hmm.
obviously you don't want to purposely grow your hair out to make a statement like, oh, I'm going to be a woman, or vice versa. I'm going to shave my head because culturally I know that men do that and I'm going to try to be a man. So I guess we kind of already talked about the Nazarite vow. In fact, I forgot it was a question towards the bottom, but we mentioned that. So I'm just going to go to this idea of like, are Christians to consider like the styles of hair that they wear, like whether in worship or outside of worship? And I know this is getting more and more serious. Okay. So like for me, like you mentioned shrinkage earlier. I have major shrinkage. In fact, I just washed my hair like a couple nights ago, and I really just didn't pick it out except for moisturizing and stuff like that. But if I pick it out, my hair comes out here, and
Mhm.
eventually I'm going to reveal it to you. I haven't revealed it to many people because I just don't think to reveal it to many people. But eventually, I want to get locks.
Mhm.
I'm purposely trying to remember not to say dread in front of it, but like the traditional locks, I guess you can say.
Mhm.
That's eventually what I want, primarily because of ease, as well, and also because I just don't like shorter hair. I mean,
Mhm.
my entire family has longer hair. On my dad's side, like men and the women, my dad has locks. My brother had locks. He cut his locks because he did some damage to a great portion of his head due to dyeing his hair, which I
Mhm.
didn't know dyeing your hair would could stunt the growth of it. But yeah, like how are Christians to actually consider like their styles that they wear in worship or outside of worship? I mean, do they need to really do that, or what do you think about that?
Okay, so the first, and I'm sorry, most of these questions that come from a female's point of view.
Yeah, that's fine.
But
Yeah.
I do believe that the two instances in the Bible that specifically talk about hair are referring to women. I do believe that a lot of, when we talk about modesty, I don't think modesty is just clothing. I think it is in everything, our attitudes, the way we look, everything, and I for men and women. Um, but in specifically in First Timothy 2:9 and First Peter 3:3 and 4, um, they talk about not to braid your hair lavishly, gold in your hair and stuff like that. And the reason that this was said when I was reading it is because in the first century, many women were plaiting elaborate hair designs that would take hours to construct and weave. Now, when I read that, I was kind of like, okay, I have clients that take 47 hours to do their hair, but that's a little bit different
Yeah.
because they're not doing it to make a statement like they were in the first century. A lot of these women were doing it, and it was turning into like worship,
Hmm.
excuse me, assemblies, like fashion shows, like to outdo somebody else. And so that's what, they weren't, we're not going to church to outdo somebody else.
Right.
Now, I personally believe when I go to church, I should look my best for God because I think that puts me in the right mindset of, having myself put together. Um, it just shows reverence that I am taking this seriously, and everyone's best is different than someone
Right.
else. So I can never say, oh, my best is better than theirs because I wore a dress today. I'd never had that mindset before because I don't believe that's the case because someone's best can be jeans and sneakers, and that could be their absolute best. Um, so I believe when they're talking about this, uh, the styling of the hair, braiding, I have a style that I do sometimes where I put little beads in my hair or whatever. And I just do it because I think it looks cute. Like I'm not
Mhm.
doing it to outdo somebody else. And I think when
Right.
we get to that point, we're kind of crossing the line, especially in worship. Now, outside of worship, I think is a little bit different. Um, and I'm gonna talk about it a little bit more. But now, like for worship, I wouldn't say, how somebody would wear like a tiara, if
Yeah.
they do like at a formal event or a wedding, that I probably like, no, that draws the line.
Yeah.
There's some things common sense, you're not gonna do this to your hair because I know that's a fancy hairstyle. Why are you wearing a fancy hairstyle at church? Are you trying to outshine? Because you can tell
Hmm.
a lot of times you're trying to outshine somebody else. But a lot of times when people do their hair for church, it is not to outshine, it's to look their best.
Right.
Um, and so I just think, when we do it, we should just think about it. If we think sometimes if we think it, is this too much? Maybe it is, having that, just for church especially. I have been places where when I was in Tennessee, there was someone that came up, and this is not hair, but just in general, there were not a lot of where I was. The congregation was not very mixed. There
Hmm.
was probably like five of us.
Yeah.
But he wore a three-piece suit to church, and someone came up to him and told him, "We don't do that here. Um, we, we're more casual than that." And he was from New York, and in New York, you wore three-piece suits and ties and your best shoes when you went to church, and so that's what his best was, and so that's what he wore to church. But in no way was he doing that to make it seem like everyone else wasn't wearing their best, but someone took it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to hair, we have to think about it. Um, I've seen some crazy hairstyles, in elaborate hairstyles. And I would know if someone would wear the church. Obviously, they're trying to one
Yeah.
up something. But so just taking that into consideration. Outside of worship, um, no, I mean, when you think about it, a lot of times when we do things, like for jobs especially, we're not going to do something. Sometimes we take, how do I say this, more liberties,
Yeah.
um, when it comes to like church, like for modesty, for example. Sometimes people come to church wearing something I know they would never wear to work, or like especially like in a business setting, or some things. I'm like, so why did you wear that to church? Like, and that's kind of the same with hair. You would never wear this hairstyle to work. Why did you wear it to church? And it's not because it's not what you consider your best. It's because it's like elaborate and you just want to be fancy.
Mm-hmm.
Because that can distract somebody. You can be looking like, why do you have a basket on your head? You know, and so and I think sometimes we got to take that into consideration. Like my mom tells me this all the time. My mom sometimes she's working on, but sometimes she struggles with the idea of people wearing like dirty jeans to church. And she's like, I have seen them, after work or after certain things, wearing something that's a lot more appropriate. And so she's not trying to judge, but she knows that they have better.
Yeah.
Um, and so for church, sometimes it's like, why are we doing this? And just like I would say, just like you don't want to do your hair over style it, you want to make sure that it's not like, I mean, I don't know what someone's going through, but I don't ever think, I put on lipstick while I'm driving,
Mm-hmm.
I can finger comb my hair while I'm driving. I could, and sometimes people come to church like they just roll out of bed. And that, I think on Sundays we should prepare ourselves, for church. So we should be getting up early so that we don't have to roll out of bed and go to church. And I think we should be mentally preparing ourselves the night before and the morning of, so that we are presentable, because we are going to worship God,
Yeah.
Um, and we should take that seriously. And sometimes in the way we look can make it seem like we're not. So we have to be careful. But I always want to say I'm never judging somebody, but we just have to be careful. Um, so, and that's how I feel about hairstyles outside of worship. Um, a lot of times we're not going to do something crazy, especially like in our day to day lives, going to work,
That's
school,
true.
but yet we'll do it for church. So we got to be, careful. We do have to consider our hairstyles, especially for church, on this side of making sure it's not like crazy elaborate, something that would distract others. I get distracted easily. um, and it's not, and that's why I sit in the front. No
Yeah,
one
I
else
sit in the
in front of
front
me,
too.
so I can't see what else is distracting. So we have to do it also for other people, making sure that that's not a distracting hairstyle. Sometimes I'm scared of wearing a bun because my bun is like huge, and I'm like, what if someone sitting behind me now that can't see and all I do is stare at the back of my bun? Is that distracting to them? And so sometimes I try my best, if I can, to not wear a bun that may block someone's view, because
Right.
it's out there. Um, and so we have to think about things like that, I believe, when it comes to worship. And outside of worship, to be completely honest, I don't believe many of us would do anything super crazy.
Right.
So, um, which is interesting to me, you
Yeah.
know.
To say the least, right? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you obviously God is a God who cares about motives. And I mean, that's evident from, you think about First Corinthians 9, 6 and following, I believe. And this whole idea of being a cheerful giver, right? I mean, you have to, you have these adjectives that describe the action that we are to perform. And if you go back and think about that carefully, it's like, well, why can't I just give? No, you can't just give, because it matters how you give, right? And I think the same It's true in so many other facets and areas of our lives. Like it depends on how or why you're wearing your hair that way. Like what message are you trying to convey? What are you trying to get across? And without going into much detail because it was a very controversial topic, I I'm thankful to be able to work alongside Bellevue Church of Christ here in Nebraska, and part of my duties is to teach Wednesday night Bible class, preach once a month on Sundays, and things like that, and then also teach the Sunday morning Bible class. But on Wednesdays, I have taken the liberty to make it a little more informal because I know people are just getting off work and stuff like that, and you're coming, and we're trying to have a more like a conversational style
Mhm.
study. And 2 weeks ago, we got into the idea, or excuse me, a month ago now, we got into the idea of dressing. And is there a difference between women dressing and men dressing? But that's a topic for another episode. But boy, did we get into some stuff that it really just caused me to think. So I don't know if you've seen like the Harry Styles Vogue picture, where he was the first male ever featured on Vogue, and the question I had was like, well, why do you think that is? Do you think it's because he chose to wear a I don't know a primarily uh, woman deemed outfit, or and that got him the cover of Vogue? Because I know plenty of men who have rocked suits that look absolutely great, but they have never been featured on Vogue. Then we got into the idea of hair, and like, are there distinctions between male hair, female hair? And that's kind of where I want to land right now, because that one has definitely rocked my mind in a lot of ways, because there are people who actually believe that there are, and then there are some people who don't believe that there are any distinctions. So just going to throw this out to you. Do you believe that there are distinctions between hairstyles for females and hairstyles for males?
Yes,
Okay.
I do. I and I guess I should explain. Like, if a man were to throw on a wig,
Mm-hmm.
a girl wig, I would know that's a girl wig. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I took from this question, the first thing I did was go, like I mentioned before, Deuteronomy 22:5. Um, I believe that men are supposed to dress like men and have hairstyles like men, and women are supposed to dress like women and have hairstyles like women. And I believe that there are some that cross the line. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with a guy having long hair, having a
Mm-hmm.
man bun. I've seen guys look extremely manly with man buns. Um, I've seen guys who I have a friend. He his hair is big and he still looks like a man.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I have a guy at church that I know his hair is long and he still looks like a guy. And so I believe, you can have certain hairstyles that may be a little bit different than what all the other guys wear. And you still look like a man. And I think
Right.
that's where we draw the line is, do you look like a man or do you look like a woman? Like if a guy were to get braids added into his hair, like long ones down the back. I've seen guys do like little short braids.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they still look like a guy. I mean, I'm fine with that. But like when you there's a line, and everyone knows what that line is, because you look in the mirror and you can tell what the line is. Because if you look like a female, you've crossed the line.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do believe that there are distinctions in between hairstyles, but there are a lot that are unisex.
Yeah.
So I just think personally, as Christians, we should be careful. And I I'm I kind of have the mindset that if something offends somebody, we need to seriously take that into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Um, especially like I don't mean like if your hair, like if someone was offended by my natural hair because they're like it's locks, I'm not gonna cut off my hair.
Right.
Really, but as a woman, I've never run into anyone that has had a problem with my hair. And it's probably because one, I don't talk about it like it's a religious thing or anything like that. Um, but as a guy, like if someone says, I think you look really feminine and it's confusing my kids, or I think you should take that into consideration, especially depending on what role you're trying to play. And like if you want to be in a role of leadership, you got to take that into consideration. Like, will this possibly hinder somebody? there are certain areas that I know. I had a friend in Tennessee, and uh, this is kind of a little off topic, but not really. He we were talking, and if we were to keep talking to the point of a relationship, the elders of his congregation told him, I don't know if you'd be able to um, evangelize to the community in a mixed relationship because people in this area will not accept that. And I say that to say in a sense of hairstyles. If you have a hairstyle, do you think someone will come and be like, "Oh no, I don't want to,"
Mm,
you know what I mean? Um, so we have to think about it, take it into serious consideration. And like you said, like you were thinking about, eventually getting locks. And I have no problem with guys getting locks at all. I believe that I know many guys who are professional, high standings that have amazing looking locks, and it's just how you maintain them and take care of them. And I believe anyone can have that and still look the way they need to look and be presentable and not offend. Um, and like I but if you came in looking having weekend hair, then I would kind of be like, what are you doing? um,
yeah.
so I just think in everything we do in our lives, especially as Christians, we need to take into consideration. And
Yeah.
if we question it, I think we should maybe hold off if we question it ourselves about doing something, because if we're thinking it, someone else probably is too.
Hmm.
Think about that. So I definitely, and if someone has said it to you, especially in a loving manner, it's something to definitely consider. Uh, because there's ways that you can kind of have, and sometimes guys don't pay attention. I'm talking about more about guys than girls right now, because I think female hairstyles, like, it's very hard for a female to look manly if they're not trying.
Yeah.
Whereas a guy sometimes can take on a little bit more, have more feminine traits,
Yeah.
um,
I get what you're saying.
without trying. So I think, if someone says something, maybe take into consideration, because there's so much confusion, and it's starting in the church, with gender. Um, oh, what's the word?
But dysphoria.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a main thing to think about when you think about hairstyles,
Hmm.
because there's a lot of kids who are confused. And I don't think we talk about it enough, in a sense. That's way off topic, but so it's just something to consider, especially if someone would say it to you, or if you think about it, maybe be like, just wise. Um, yeah, that's my very long answer.
No, no, no. I think that definitely helps because it's a lot of stuff we don't talk about enough, and I'm trying to be more conscious of that, and at least deal with the big topics that most people don't deal with, especially in the church. And not to say I'm going to have the perfect answer for these sort of mainstream topics, but at least I can be the start of a conversation that someone who's I don't know, more educated, more knowledgeable about it than me can at least sort of tie the loose ends up so that for the rest of us we can now have a form of conviction on it. But as we come to a close, I just want to say, like, first of all, like, I have thoroughly enjoyed learning. Learning for me is like a big deal. I learn every day. And I try to tell people that, you know, it just sucks that I do most of the talking because of the vocation that I'm in. But I try my best to listen to people more than I talk because I do a lot of talking. And it has been amazing listening to you. There's a lot of stuff that I know for sure that I want to do with this particular episode, especially once it releases. But before we go, like, I have to just end with sort of tying up the last two questions.
Mhm.
Um, when I think about, first of all, like, I feel that culture has a lot to do with, yeah, the styles of hair that we wear, the distinctions that are made between like female and male hair, even going back to the Corinthian time, uh, like the Roman Greek culture. Rome kind of took a lot of Greek culture and meshed it together in their own culture. And part of that was when they went to the temple and prostitutes, would wear their hair down or stuff like that. So Paul's like, oh, you don't need to, you need to keep your head covered. or you might as well shave it, right? Well, obviously that was a cultural thing, and Paul was telling them they need to steer away from that. And so the distinctions are obviously made in scripture. And I think, as you stated before, we do need to be mindful or careful of those particular distinctions. But is it permissible to color one's hair? And I guess how would you answer this idea of uh, the cutting of hair coming into a like just a practice now, especially for guys? Like, just they just cut their hair and it's not for grievance purposes anymore. But yeah, what do you think about that? Is it permissible to color one's hair, and where did this practice of cutting the hair in general come from?
Okay, so coloring hair, I think it's fine. I I I have no problem with hair coloring. And I don't really see anywhere in the Bible where it would talk about hair coloring. And it kind of goes back to the question when we talked about braiding of the hair and things like that. Um, as someone who may be in a role of speaking or
Mhm.
leadership, maybe be careful, if we color it like hot pink,
Yeah.
especially as a guy. I've seen guys color their hair hot pink, and I'm just like, why? Because I know pink is not a girl color, but a lot of people think it is. Think
Right.
of it as a girl color. Um, but like if a preacher were to color his hair hot pink, I think a lot of people would be like, what's going on? It's kind of going back to like distinctions between like when we were talking about being conscious of what you're doing when you
Hmm.
color your hair. And I think that kind of we have to think about that on all aspects. So coloring would definitely be one of those. Um, I know a lot of people who do. Uh, I think I guess I should say in a role of depending on what role you take, like if you're in a leadership role, um, just being careful of coloring. Nothing's wrong with coloring your hair, but color it like something that's more natural than
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
anything. And just like we would for jobs, because uh, I have to do this a lot sometimes when I'm talking because we'll think that we'll we'll kind of separate them when we live our lives as if our jobs are on this huge pedestal. We're going to do everything in our power to make sure that we abide by the guidelines that we need to have this job. But yet when it comes to Christianity, sometimes we try to like
Mm,
walk across the line. So like there's a lot of jobs, if I'm working in a business environment, they're not gonna let me have blue hair.
right.
Um, and then they'll tell us why if we're in a certain role. We should apply that to our Christian lives. Why am I getting blue hair? Um, and am I in a role where that may hinder somebody? Like a teenager having blue hair, probably not a big deal.
Yeah.
But if I'm 40, 50 years old with blue hair and I'm trying to be a influence to younger women, mothers, will they take me serious? Like, you
Yeah.
have to think about stuff like that. Um, so I think it's okay. I know a lot of women who have gray hair, who dye it black, who dye
Yeah.
it
I was
a
just about to say
color.
that. Yeah.
Nothing's wrong with that. There's some people I don't even know their natural hair color, and I
Hmm.
would never know that, and I wouldn't think about it, and it wouldn't cause me to be like, what's going on because it's natural. It looks natural. Now, if someone is in their 60s and has blue hair, I know that's not their hair
Yeah.
color. So it's just thinking about from that aspect. But sometimes if we have to be careful because as a Christian, we're supposed to evangelize. Um, so if we were to have this mindset of no color, no, just like no tattoos or no piercings or no, there's gonna be a lot of people we can't reach
Yeah.
if we have a mindset of no, that's bad, you can't do that. So we have to think about that. Just like in the Bible times, in the Bible when they talk about and such were some of you, like when they were talking about the list of sins and the people, and you think about that. I think about that a lot in different aspects because there are a lot of people who come from all different types of backgrounds, and that kind of goes back to cultural backgrounds. We're trying to convert people, people who and not just cultural but just social like emo or something that's not cultural, but
Yeah, yeah, I
it's
get what
just,
you're saying.
I don't know what they call it, social or whatever. Um, but if we have this view of, you can't do that in the church, or you can't have your hair that way in the church, and you can't do this, you can't do that, we're not gonna reach a lot of people. Um, and there's ways we can teach people as they grow in their
Yeah.
Christian walk, that maybe it's wiser if we do something else, but that's, we have to take baby steps. We can't just throw it all on them. So sometimes when we talk about it from the pulpit, or, in public settings, some people can be like, well, now I feel like I am wrong because I have, my hair is this color, or I have a tattoo on my shoulder,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't pay the money to cover it up, or, and so when we take that view of no, because, we don't want to seem worldly,
Yeah.
there's a we're going into the world and trying to bring worldly people out of it, but they already have some permanent things in their life,
Mm-hmm.
um so when it comes to color, I do believe that, uh if we were to go and scream from mountaintops, coloring is wrong, which I don't think it is.
Mm-hmm.
um there are a lot of people who are going to be like, I don't want to talk to them because they're just going to judge me and all kinds of stuff. But it's a judgment call for a person depending on their position, their role that they play in the church.
No, absolutely, I agree. Of course, coming from also a guy slash preacher side, I wouldn't necessarily think too highly of getting up in the pulpit with pink hair, or with like racer blue hair color or something like that, because it'll just be distracting. I don't want to. Here's the thing that I tell like some of my buddies uh who are preachers, and they want these sort of elaborate colors. I'm with you. I don't see anywhere in the Bible where coloring your hair would be wrong. If someone wants to make that argument and say, "Oh, that's not natural," well, I mean, technically, it's not natural to cut your hair, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it stood for something. If we're talking about natural here, then both men and women have hair that grows, and so we shouldn't cut it at all. Like we should just let it go grow. That'd be the most natural, thing that we could do. But we cut it, right? We style it, everything. And so I wouldn't necessarily make that argument because it's easily refuted. But then on top of that, it's like, okay, am I going to in the pulpit to preach so that people can see Jesus, or am I going to make some social statement? Right. Like I don't need to go up there and start a social or cultural war by choosing to wear my hair a certain way purposely to do away with people's misconceptions or something. Like I don't need to do that necessarily. And so just from me to you, I thought a lot about that even when expressing my desire to get locks. Like I said, my dad, bunch of my brothers had it, sister has it, right? So like it's just sort of what I've grown up to know. But especially after going to preaching school, I always wanted to get it before that, but I thought a lot about it, and the sense was like, can I still be presentable as a Christian man with that? Will I be taken away or steering away from people who may have this sort of conception about it? But then again, one of the reasons I talked about the topic is because I've met a lot of of my Caucasian counterparts, my brothers in Christ, who have long hair, but of course it's not matted together or anything like that. So yeah, I think that's the ultimate distinction that I would draw. Am I going in the pulpit to make some social statement, or am I doing my very best to make sure that the crowd, that the audience, that the people ultimately see Jesus? And so, is there, before we go, like, are there any like closing comments that you have? Anything else that you wanted to say or speak on?
Sorry, I completely didn't even cover cutting the
Yeah,
hair
go ahead, go
like
ahead.
you asked. I did. Real quick. I did look it up.
Hmm.
But it to me there wasn't a lot of people who could like pinpoint when cutting hair. A lot of stuff goes back to the Egyptians,
Hmm.
because they had a lot of they that's when a lot of stuff started to be developed. Um, and it did symbolize, uh well, they said that a lot of barbers doubled as religious priests. Um, and this arose out of the belief that evil could enter the body through hair and had to be removed by cutting hair. So there's a lot of stuff. Like, I don't know if that is where it started.
Yeah.
If it started as a religious thing, I know in the Bible does talk about shaving heads, but it doesn't talk about. I mean, it talks about from the mourning aspect because I just showed a sign of mourning. So I guess I can't really say really much more about it. I do, however, it's kind of like women's hair and not going too crazy. I have seen a lot of you can do a lot of stuff with cutting your hair. People put little designs in their head,
Yeah.
words, and dye it different colors. Like, it's a lot of different stuff you can do. And that kind of, like, I would apply to all the other
Yeah.
things we talked about, just being careful, making sure you're not doing it to show, something. But for actually the practice of cutting of hair, I don't know where it really started.
Yeah.
But this was really interesting for me. I was really nervous about talking about this because I've never actually sat down and talked about this before. So, like, kind of like as we were talking, a lot of stuff popped into my head over the years of being around natural hair and locks and stuff like that. So I actually probably didn't look at a lot of my notes, which I'm glad I didn't have to. So I'd have to be like sitting here looking
See?
down.
Yeah, see?
But this was very interesting, and it does make me want to actually study more about it. Just because this may be something that I may have to talk about in the future, and so I may just keep up on it and developing more of my own thoughts so I can have like more firm thoughts about some things, because some of these questions I never really considered. I've the veils and the shaving of the heads and stuff. I hear a lot, in the church and stuff like that. But some of the other questions, I was like, I didn't even think about it that way. So I appreciate the questions. They were very thought provoking. And I really hope that whoever hears this helps them, because I think it is important that we understand, especially with um, Black women, that the importance of hair to us, and just the history of things that we've gone through with our hair, and the persecution that we've gone through, and just being very careful when we talk about it, and to know what we're talking about, especially when it comes to for me, a lot of stuff is about evangelism.
Right. As it should.
Because that's a passion of mine, and if we don't know how to address certain things, and this is very important because it's becoming very big. We can lose a lot of people because we're saying you can't do that. You can't do that with your hair. You can't. Why? And they're like, well, I don't want to be a part of a group that's judgmental about my hair. I already deal with this in my life. I'm not supposed to do this, at church. So this has been very helpful for me, even just talking about it. But also, I really hope that it's been beneficial to anyone who will listen to it as well, and just to help them with, if they, questions or things they deal with other people.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I'm just going to say this for those who are listening, those of you who helped come up with the questions for Vernè and for this episode, to make this episode even possible. As she just stated, I'm going to reiterate, thank you guys for sending in the questions, because that's exactly what I did. I took a poll and I only came up with 2 questions. And so the rest came from people who were interested in the topic and thought it was pretty cool that we were even having a discussion about hair and stuff like that. So thank you to you guys for making it possible. And before we head out, Vernè, just tell people how they can, I don't know, reach you or find you on social media. I know that you put up a lot of pictures of the clients' hair that you do and stuff like that. How can they find you?
So I have two different. I have an Instagram page about my hair journey. I
Okay.
guess for hair purposes, that'd probably be the main one. And that one is basically, if you type in my name, Vernè Wine, you'll find me. You'll find
Okay.
one of them. That's probably the easiest way to say that, because my name is not very common. So if you type that in, even if you find my main page, I'm linked to my hair page, and my business page. Also my esthetician page, because skincare is another passion of mine. And also Facebook is probably another easy way. Just I'm not very private on Facebook because I don't have anything to hide. So and you can find my business page is linked to my Facebook as well. So that's probably the easiest way. It's just type in my name, Vernè Wine, and I'll pop up.
Well, fantastic. Well, I, for one, I'm going to be the first to say thank you. And I enjoyed the episode. It was very enlightening to me just to hear, again, just the knowledge and receive the knowledge and stuff of hair and how it evolved over time. And man, just especially the traditional lock versus dreadlock thing. That was very helpful. So thank you so much for that. I appreciate you for being on the episode today.
Thank you for inviting me. It was great.
So as you can tell, that was definitely an episode jam-packed with great material. There were some things that Vernè talked about that I had never heard of. Some things about, especially the dreadlocks, I didn't know about the religious affiliation and the origin of the term dread, and of course accompanying that with locks. And so definitely appreciate her time and her effort, and also her great determination to research these matters to give us a quality episode. And so always, again, thankful for Vernè and thankful for all of our guest speakers that come on to make this episode or make this podcast possible. I'm thankful to you guys as well for being listeners. And please, if you have any details or questions or thoughts that you would want addressed, or maybe some concerns that you may have, please let me know. You can inbox me on Facebook, or you can email me at dweb25@outlook.com, and I will get back to you obviously as soon as possible. If there are any episodes that you would like to hear discussed, anything that you have questions with, or anything of that nature, just let me know and I will be glad to address those. As always, guys, thank you so much, and may God bless.